Good morning, welcome back to a brand new vid and a brand new year, 2017. Unbelievable. It sounds so futuristic, doesn't it? 2017, it seems like yesterday, it was like 1987, and here we are 30 years later. Absolutely strange how time flies. So I'm going to do a vinyl vid, obviously, and I'd like to, going forward, make these much more of a regular thing, you know, because in the past I've been very, very infrequent, and I'd like the frequency to be more regular, quite frankly. So here we are, right at the start of a brand new year, and hopefully, maybe every 3 to 4 weeks, that's in theory what I'd like to do. But every 3 or 4 weeks, I can do an updated vinyl vid, and that will also incorporate, you know, CDs, Blu-rays, DVDs, books, maybe, anything music-related. I was going to say cassettes, but there's not going to be any cassettes. I highly doubt it. Unless I've got some of my old cassettes which I get shipped over from the UK, and for the sake of nostalgia, I may show them, but... Yeah, I'm back into the vinyl and have been for a few years now, but cassettes, not really for me. I know there's a few kind of hipsters who are trying to make it a big thing. And listen, if you're into it, fantastic, you know, whatever you're into works. But for me, cassettes, nah, not for me. But anyway, so I've got 5 records, and I've got one Blu-ray and one DVD. One's related to this, to these pickups, and the other one isn't. Well, it is in the sense that it's music, but it's not related because I haven't got a record for the band that is featured on the Blu-ray. More of that in a second. So the first up is one which I've just got for Christmas, actually, and it's the Beatles, live at the Hollywood Bowl. Basically, this is essentially a re-release of sorts. Obviously, this ties in with the Blu-ray and DVD, which has just recently been released by director Ron Howard from Happy Days, amongst other things, but I think Happy Days automatically. And, re-released, in a sense, because it first came out in 1977, I believe, anyway. But this one is, basically, it's been re-released with, it's sounding better, obviously, what's the word, like kind of remastered, essentially. And I think there's a few extra tracks. Which ones they are, I'm not sure without looking. Oh, and it says at the back, bonus tracks here. You Can't Do That, I Want to Hold Your Hand, Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, and Babies in Black. So maybe those are the 4 bonus tracks which weren't on the original release. So yeah, they're all tracks basically from the Beatles live. I think I just showed this, I know I did actually, but I'll do it again. Live at the Hollywood Bowl. And the hysteria, as we all know by the Beatles, was something else. You put the record on, and the teenage girls, and maybe some teenage boys as well for that matter, screaming beyond belief. And you can hear the songs over the top of it, of course, but it's so prevalent in the background, and it's just unbelievable. It must have been absolutely insane to have been the Beatles, or even been at the gig, or just been around at that time. The hysteria is something else. And so yeah, basically all these tracks are from the Hollywood Bowl, as I keep saying. I think it's over, it doesn't say at the back, but I think, from what I remember, it's from 3 or 4 different nights that were recorded in 1964 and 1965. So spread across a couple of years. But yeah, hysteria, as I keep saying, absolutely insane. The screaming, the adulation that you hear going on in the background is something which I guess still takes place, but for maybe it's more reserved for bands like, I don't know, and I'm completely guessing here, things like One Direction, you know, those kind of teenagey girl, predominantly girl, but boy as well, bands. Groups, bands, boy bands, whatever you want to call them. Because the Beatles essentially were a boy band, you know, for all intents and purposes. But yeah, I do like them. But I've got to be honest, for me, when it comes to the Beatles, I prefer their mid-60s to late 60s, or right at the turn of 1970s, because they split up in 70 with their last album coming out in 1970. That's the kind of stuff I like. You know, when it started to get a little bit kind of psychedelic, in the mid-60s, you know, kind of Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, that's my kind of thing. I do like the early stuff. It's just a little bit too tinny for me, a little bit too kind of teenagey, not really my thing. But of course there's some classics, you can't deny that. So that's the first one. Now next up, I mean, talk about a contrast from one end of the spectrum to the other, kind of. We've got the Beatles, and then we've got Guns N' Roses. This is Use Your Illusion 2. Now, this is a double album. I'm sure you're all aware of this. It came out on the same day in September 1991. I think it was September. It was definitely 91 anyway. It came out the same time as, unsurprisingly, Use Your Illusion, the first one. So you've got part 1 and part 2. Now, for me, 1's really good. I do like it. But even back when it came out in the early 90s, I much preferred this one, and it was basically as a result, because I've got the track list on the back there. It was songs like, well, all of them really, but I mean, Knocking on Heaven's Door, You Could Be Mine, which I think was one of the theme tunes on Terminator 2, so that's a nostalgic movie straight away. Don't Cry, which was the alternative version. I think the other one was on Use Your Illusion, the first album. Let's see, what else? Civil War was a good song, 14 Years, Yesterdays, Shotgun Blues. I mean, a lot of good songs. But my favourite has got to be, and it was back in the day as well, Get in the Ring. I absolutely love that song. And Axl Rose, halfway through, or 3/4 of the way through the song, kind of famously, you know, just rips into a string of people, you know, rock journalists at the time who I guess he had a beef with. And it's so funny for him just to libel all these people in a record. And he got away with it, I think. Maybe he was sued, I'm not sure. I've never really looked into that story. But it is just funny how he had the balls to do that, to literally name all these people, slag them off, and put it on record, and it's there, you know, for the rest of the time. Nothing you can do about it. And, you've got to have some kind of personality to do that. So, yeah, brilliant record, a seminal kind of rock record for me. And I kind of miss those days. There's not many bands who have done it where they will do like a double release, you know, on the same day. Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 coming out 1991, same day in September. And I think more bands should do that because they must have, you know, so many tracks written when they go to record an album. And probably what they do these days, of course, is just to set aside, say, 10, 15 tracks, put it on one album, and then save all the other tracks for another album that they'll release in 2 or 3 years. But no, release them at the same time. You know, that's what I do. If you've got music, put it out there. You know, releasing a double album, it's just, there's something special about it. And I think Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 are just two fantastic albums. And the fact that they came out on the same day, and two kind of different albums as well, I think is something really special. I think more bands should do it. Anyway, that's my little mini rant there about the music industry, which probably didn't make a great deal of sense. Now, the next one up, this is kind of an unusual one. It's by Johnny Borrell and Zazu, if I pronounced that right. And the album is called The Atlantic Culture. Now, Johnny Borrell, in case you didn't know, or maybe this will remind you, was, or is, I don't think they've split up, but they haven't released an album for a long, long time, but he was the singer of the band called Razorlight, who, you know, sold a lot of records back in the early part of the millennium, kind of early to mid part of the millennium. And Johnny Borrell is almost like a self-appointed rock god. You know, he was the gift of the gab, he talked the talk, he thought he was, I was going to say more special and talented than he was. That sounds a bit arrogant from me. I mean, he's a decent, talented songwriter. I never had a problem with him, but I know a lot of people in the music industry did, because he loves himself. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, you've got to big yourself up to a degree, I guess, and it sells records. Although the funny thing about this is, technically this is his, I believe, second solo album, and his first solo album, I think, sold something ridiculous, like 500 copies in its first week, which, if you think about it, is awful, bearing in mind it sold millions of records from Razorlight. And then to release your first solo album, which I think was called something like Borrell 1, something like that, which is a bit of a weird title anyway. And it must have had like a limited release and limited exposure. But to sell that few must be pretty embarrassing. I know at the time, and subsequently he said he didn't care. There was a quote at the time, this has gone back many years, but it was something along the lines of, you know, if I only sold 500 in the first week, if that's 500 people who really like it, then that's all that matters. Which is true, but at the same time, you'd expect to sell more than that. So I believe Zazu is not an individual. I think Zazu is basically the rest of his band. And I think it's an old French word as well, Zazu. Maybe meaning, and I'm completely speculating on this, but meaning like a group of people. So maybe that's what it is. But yeah, Zazu is not a person like I initially thought it was. It's basically the rest of the band who play with him, who I think pretty much all of them played with him on his debut album. But it sounds kind of continental, doesn't it, Zazu? Got that kind of French, Gaelic kind of flair to it. So yeah, that's that. Now, this is a really eclectic album because it's got a mixture of rock, I was going to say pop, not really pop, folk music, blues, almost gospel-like, jazz-like in a sense, and it's a really strange mix. If you like Razorlight, you probably wouldn't immediately, you know, find this appealing, but I guess if you're open-minded, and if you like Johnny Borrell, if you maybe like Razorlight, you may want to give this a chance. Now, I first discovered a track by these relatively recently. This came out in 2015, So technically 2 years ago now, even though we're just obviously very, very early, first day of 2017. But I discovered these a few months ago, and it was on YouTube, just doing a random search, and they were covering, Johnny Borrell and Zazu, a track called Juniper. I think that's how you pronounce it. I can't remember who wrote it. I think it's a very old kind of song. It may even be a French song, speaking of France, but I could be wrong. And I thought it was really, really good. It's nothing like Razorlight at all. It's almost folk-driven. I'm probably going to use that as an example in the description box below, along with another track which is from this album, because that cover of Juniper isn't on here. So I'll put a link to that. It is different, so take that into consideration. And Johnny Borrell's got a moustache, so he kind of looks a little bit stupid, but kind of cool as well. You know, so yeah, I'll put that down below. Now, I picked up this album because, well, I heard that track, that Juniper song, and I immediately thought, well, I like that, I'm going to get that. And I couldn't find it on Amazon, the album. I couldn't find it on eBay. I couldn't find it basically anywhere. Even on, like, Discogs, it wasn't there. I couldn't see it. Not available for sale anyway. So I essentially ended up going on his official website, which I'd never been to before, never frequented it, and it was there, I think, for $18.99 to $19, which is about 14, 15 quid, including shipping to America. And I thought, well, let's get it, you know, and I can imagine, genuinely, that becoming quite a rare record in the future. I'm not saying it's going to be, you know, become expensive. It probably isn't. But it seems as if it's got a very, very limited release. So if you want to get it, if you like the sound of it, head on over to his website. I think it's called something like johnnyborrellshop.com or something like that. And you'll see it. But it might not be your thing. I'm not saying it's amazing, by the way. It's different. And I'm glad I've got it, because it's going to be, I think, quite hard to get hold of in the future. It's decent. It's not amazing, but it's decent. So, next up is a female band, or band in a way. It's just her, essentially, with other musicians as well, which I guess kind of makes the band. But the name she goes by is Ladyhawke, and she's from New Zealand, kind of the same age as me, either a year older or a year younger, something like that. And I'd never heard of her up until maybe about a year and a half ago. I think this is possibly her third solo album, and it's essentially kind of a pop, a bit of new wave, a bit of rock, but more pop-driven, electropop, synth pop, that kind of stuff. So if that's your bag, you're probably going to like this. Now, in a way, I'm looking at the back here, there's a lot of good tracks in there. Wild Things, A Love Song, Chills. The list does go on the back there. But it's one of those weird albums for me where straight away, it reminds me of, there's a band, or again an artist, called Little Boots, and her album's called Working Girl, and that would have been on my vinyl pickup video either last year or the year before. And this album is very similar to that, not just in the sound, very synth pop and pop driven, but similar in the sense that pretty much every track I really like. Now, I'm not saying they're absolutely amazing, but every track, one after the other, was where I thought, I really like that. That's got a good beat, that's got a good vibe to it, that sounds very clubby and very summery almost. You know, you can imagine going out driving with that blaring out. Or just, I don't know, chilling out in the summer, in your garden for that matter, or in your house with the sun kind of shining outside. Very kind of summer-driven. So if you like your electro-pop synth music, you're probably going to like that. Like this, and also like the Little Boots record, which I'm pointing over there. Technically, it is over there. But one which I showed, like I say, on my pickup video, I think last year or the year before. And that's actually quite unusual, you know, to put a record on and like pretty much every track. Because usually, at least with me, you know, I'll start a record, and if a song hasn't grabbed me within the first 30 seconds, certainly by the first minute, I'm skipping on to the next one. And often, you know, it is literally years later, in some cases, where I'll play that song back, or songs from an album I've always skipped, and I'll really like it, and I'll think, well, why didn't that grab me back in the day? It's weird, isn't it, how sometimes a song can instantly hit you when you'll like it, and then other times, for whatever reason, it may take years. Maybe you've got to be in that zone, in that mood. It's kind of strange how it works. And then last but not least, there are two, there's a Blu Ray and a DVD, but the last vinyl is one which I picked up quite a while ago, but I didn't have it on a pickup vid. And it's Super by the Pet Shop Boys. So this is the one that came out last year. And once again, you know, the Pet Shop Boys for me just seem to go from strength to strength. Neil Tennant, I think he's 60... He's in his early 60s now, which is staggering to think. And Chris Lowe, the other part of the Pet Shop Boys, part of the duo, must be in his very late 50s. He's not that much younger. So it's just incredible. They're going on and on and on. And for me, they sound better. Now, maybe in this day and age, they're not as relevant as to what they were, because, you know, the whole music industry has changed, of course, everything about it. So it's very hard for someone to stay on top of their game for 30-odd years, particularly in kind of a dance, again, synth-poppy kind of world. But I think, you know, they're getting better, if anything. Their songs, the production is much better than what it was in recent years. It was probably around about the probably late 90s to the early parts of the millennium. I probably fell out the loop a little bit with the Pet Shop Boys. But really, from the last sort of 5 or 6 years, they've really got their game back. And it really did start, I think, especially from their last album, which I think was called Electric. I picked that up. That was probably my first vinyl pickup vid. The first vinyl I think I rebought. And that was a great album. And this one follows it up very nicely. So yeah, things like Happiness, The Pop Kids, 20-something, Inner Sanctum, Undertow, Sad Robot World, Say It To Me, Burn. The list goes on. It's a really, really good album. Very strong. Again, another very summery kind of album. And one which I just love. If you love that electropop music, you got to love the Pet Shop Boys. And if someone out there doesn't like them, seriously, come on. They are amazing. An amazing band. Longevity. Yeah, just a brilliant band. And getting better, bizarrely. For me, anyway. Now, 2 movies of sorts. The first one up, I've not seen this, or yet to see it, I should say. Obviously, I bought it, so I want to see it, and I will. But it ties into the Beatles, because it's the DVD release, the special edition, nice kind of thick card here, like a book, of 8 days a week. So you open it up, and it comes in a nice little slipcase of sorts, and it folds out again with the 2 discs, and quite a relatively thick booklet there, and some nice artwork on the back of looking down at them on the stage, which I imagine probably is from the Hollywood Bowl. So, yeah, I've yet to watch it, but directed by Ron Howard, as I touched upon before, Happy Days fame. And, yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching it now. I've got the DVD version. I did want the Blu Ray, I've got to be honest, but it was sold out at the time, and I was being a bit greedy, and I didn't want to wait, so I thought, well, I'll just get the DVD. And looking online and reading a few things on Amazon, and even watching a few vids on YouTube, a lot of people didn't really seem to care that they'd picked up the DVD version. And what they were saying, really, for the most part, was because it's old footage and kind of been remastered, and much of it has also been colorised as well. Not sure where I stand on that. But a lot of people were saying because it's old footage, it doesn't really matter if you get the DVD or the Blu Ray release. It's pretty much the same thing. Special features, I think, are pretty much the same as well. So I didn't see the point of getting the Blu Ray. Now, if I subsequently find out that the Blu Ray has got loads of extra special features and it's so much better, then I'll pick it up. But for now, I'm happy with the DVD. And then last but not least is another one I just picked up just before Christmas, and we watched it yesterday, and I thought it would be a little bit cheesy. It kind of is in parts, but I'm glad I've got it, and I did really like it, and I like the way it was done. It's made by the same producers of Amy and Senna, Ayrton Senna, and that is Oasis Supersonic. So the cover's a little bit kind of cheesy on there, and the spine. I'm not a massive fan of the spine, which sounds ridiculous, but it just seems to, like, red and black. It doesn't, which is rich of me because I'm wearing this. You probably can't see it if I put that there. It doesn't really seem to go. It's kind of like a grey and a black, really. But it's a minor quibble. In fact, it's not even a quibble. I'm just being stupid. But yeah, so this is the Blu-ray release. I don't even know if it got a DVD. It may have done. But this is what I like about this, is it doesn't concentrate so much on Oasis as in like a biography from when they started out, which technically was 1991, up until when they finished, which, when was that? Was that 2008? 2009? It doesn't really talk about that. It focuses very much on the origins of the band, how they started, and it goes all the way up into the Nebworth gig, essentially, which was 1996. So 20 years, or it was 20 years last year, since that Nebworth double gig, I think. Was it 2 or 3 nights they played? I should know, I just bloody watched this yesterday. But yeah, in front of 250,000 people across those gigs. It was the biggest gig, I think, to date, and may still be. Maybe it's been surpassed since, I'm not sure. but I remember it was a big deal at the time. Excuse me. Me and a friend of mine tried to buy tickets for it, and we couldn't. It was sold out, obviously. So many people wanted to see it. So I couldn't see it at the time, and I've not seen it since. I mean, I've seen snippets of the gig, obviously, over the years, bits on YouTube as well. And I used to have the live CD of it, which I bought like a bootleg CD of it at the time. But yeah, so it's really good, and it's not so much a nostalgia trip. It's not like that. It's not cheesy, because like I say, it very much focuses on the very beginning of Oasis. It doesn't take into account all the later stuff. It focuses very much on how they started, why they started, the impact they made, which is unquestionable. You know, even if you don't like Oasis, you can't question that. They made a massive splash in the music industry. And it was such a massive rise as well, from being unemployed, basically, to like 2 years later to playing Nebworth, which is something else. It really is. Sorry, I'm just still recovering from a cold, so I'm coughing like a beast. So, yeah, I'd go as far as saying if you don't like Oasis, if you're not a massive fan of Oasis, you'll possibly still like this, because it's more of a music documentary. And I think, give it a chance. Give it a chance, because you may be surprised. It's very kind of enlightening. So, as an Oasis fan, I didn't really learn anything new, but I'm very pleased that they went with the direction, or the director. Is it Matt Whitecross, I think you call him? It doesn't quite say, or I can't quite see it. It's something like that, Mike Whitecross, something along those lines. He's around about my age as well, so I think he's slightly older, just again by a year or two. So he can remember, you know, what it was like at the time, and it's interesting, you know, that he chose to go with that kind of early part of Oasis history. Did I say that wrong still? Oasis's history. There we go. So yeah, really good, and I definitely recommend it. So that's those two. One which I've seen, one which I've not, but both of them very, very pleased to get. And then there's the records. You can't really see, bit of spinach. So yeah, really pleased to get them, and pleased to get this final vid out of the way. It sounds like it was a chore. It wasn't a chore to make it, but pleased in the sense to get it out of the way, because I want to start making these very regular going forward, maybe every 3 to 4 weeks, like I say. So anyway, until my next vid, which technically my next vid's probably going to be today or tomorrow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Take it easy. And again, Happy New Year. Let's make it a good one.